People weren't talking about human trafficking like they are now. And really it's because of the work and efforts by organizations like Operation Underground Railroad. He will never talk about himself, but Tim is a well-respected author, lecturer, professor, and he could have a quiet life doing that, kind of like Indiana Jones. But he has another side to him, and that's his law enforcement career. He was a respected law enforcement agent for many years. And because his heart is so big and he's so compassionate and wants to protect every child and man and woman that he possibly can in the world, he left the comfort of his badge and his pension and his way of life in law enforcement to several years ago step out with a lot of faith to create Operation Underground Railroad. And the time he and Catherine did it, they had no promise that anybody was going to care.
You don't just jump on a plane and traipse into a country and say, here I am, where can I go save somebody? There are so many things that have to be considered. You're shedding your badge, you're shedding your firearm, you're shedding your authority, you're shedding all the jurisdictional limitations that prohibit people from doing that very thing. But Tim had the courage to do that.
I think there's something to say about Tim's persistence, I guess is the word I would use for him. He wants to be a consistent influence in your life, and he's dedicated, and I noticed the same thing as he got into government work, that he wanted to get in and make a difference and shake things up, and you could tell he wanted to get in there and make something happen.
I grew up in Southern California. I always knew that I wanted to be a federal agent. I just wanted to do that. I don't know why, it was just like inherent. My family wasn't excited about it. My parents thought it was crazy. No one in our family had been military or even generations back or law enforcement. But it was just something that I just wanted to do. So I pursued it. Everything I studied political science, I studied international relations. My first job after graduate school was the CIA, and I worked in the operations center. And my study had been around terrorism and weapons. I graduated from graduate school in December of 2001. So the government was wide open for terrorist experts. And that's what I wanted to do. And as I was learning about what happened at 9/11, I learned that one of the terrorists had come from Mexicali, Mexico, and came through the port of entry into California and there back east, and then helped launch these attacks. And I wanted to get on a border. I spoke Spanish. I thought I want to help investigate and defend against terrorists, potential terrorists that would hurt our country. I got to the office in Calexico, California. I had my dream job. I mean, I was sitting on the border. My office was on the border. I could see the Mexican flag waving outside my window. This was the time when we were finding a bunch of tunnels through San Diego and all the way through the border in California. I was crawling through tunnels, and it was great, but it only lasted for about 6 months. And I was called in by my boss, and he told me that we're starting a new anti-child trafficking group.
We knew that bad people were transmitting and receiving exploitive information, very, very dangerous information, and they were violating children literally, real time.
Julia, ¿cuántos años tienes? 16. ¿Está bien?
And exchanging those imageries and videos on cameras with their cohorts around the world, realized how absolutely pervasive the problem of child exploitation was.
Can you say hi to these guys? Say hi.
Sweet.
A supervisor contacted him and said, hey, we're thinking about starting a child crimes group and we want you to do it. He came home and told me about it, and we were both like, there's no way that we will ever do that. We had 2 little kids at the time. It just sounds so horrific. We didn't think that was something we wanted to bring into our home. My husband has just this light. He's able to see good in the world, you know, and he has a lot of optimism, a lot of strength. I didn't want to see that taken away. We were raising a young family. I didn't want to see that gone. And so we took it very seriously.
My wife and I had vowed that the one thing I wouldn't do was child crimes. So we said no, and I remember going home that night to my wife and saying, "You won't believe what they just asked me to do." And she said, "Well, you're not doing it." I said, I'm not doing it, absolutely not. And she said, "We have kids, you can't do it." And I remember a sleepless night that night, and then getting up the next morning and kind of looking myself in the mirror, practicing my rejection talk. And as I was preparing my speech, my wife came up to me, emotional, tears in her eyes. And she said, "We're making a huge mistake." She said, "For the very reason I thought we couldn't do this or shouldn't do this is the reason we need to do this, because we have kids. Because we know what childhood is supposed to be. And if it's true that there's millions of kids that are forced into that hell, how do we say no? Because we're afraid of our own pain, which is nothing relative to that pain."
But I told him that I had automatic veto power, that if I ever saw anything in him that just the dimming of the lights or anything, that I got to automatically pull the plug, no questions asked, and he would leave that group.
And so I reluctantly changed my speech, and it was just one word, yes, and we got into it. And then something happened that was completely transformative for me. We were doing these child pornography investigations, and one of the kids from the video surfaced, and happened to surface right on the border where I was working.
Not long ago, a horrific video of a 5-year-old boy being sexually abused in the worst way was discovered by U.S. authorities. The boy and his 12-year-old sister, they had been kidnapped and they had been trafficked back and forth between the U.S. and Mexico.
Both were sex slaves to a monster of a man. Well, something happened. Divine providence stepped in, and it took place at the U.S.-Mexico border. The boy was seen by a U.S. official who knew who he was, identified the boy in the video.
It was the first time that I was actually seeing one of the kids from the videos. It was an American man who lived in the LA area. He had a big warehouse, and inside his warehouse was a house, like a residential home. And inside that home, there were cameras, hidden cameras everywhere, porn everywhere, toys everywhere. And he'd bring these kids in to desensitize them, and he'd make child rape videos. And as the dust settled in the investigation, this kid ran to me. And I remember he jumped into my arms and just held me. And he was shaking. And he just said to me, with tears in his eyes, holding me and shaking, he said, "I don't belong here." I came home and I walked through the door and I saw my kids running around playing. And I couldn't handle the dichotomy. My brain couldn't handle it. And I shut down. I mean, this is embarrassing, but this is what happened. I remember my knees gave out as I sat there. The room was spinning and I collapsed. Like I fell down on the floor, and my wife thought I was having a heart attack or something, you know, and she ran over to me and just wrapped her arms around me and just held me.
I had a knock on my door one day, and of course I usually keep my door open, but I think I was on a phone call, so I didn't answer the door immediately. But I went to the door, I saw Tim leaving, and I asked him, "Hey Tim, I'm done, come on in." He was very, very concerned. I could tell he was perplexed. I could tell that he was emotionally drained. I could tell that he was needing someone to talk to. And he said, "Listen, I really feel like I can do better leaving the government."
Well, if you lost one of your children to one of these evil people, and you'd do anything to get even and get your child back, which some of our folks are trying to do.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and esteemed members of the committee. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Tim Ballard. I'm the founder and CEO of Operation Underground Railroad.
You know, I think our own law enforcement in this country needs to get more involved than they are right now.
In 2006, with the passage of the Adam Walsh Protect Act, Congress opened the doors for U.S. agents to better investigate these cases, especially internationally.
It's hard because a lot of this is offshore where they may not have jurisdiction.
However, I often felt helpless by the fact that the vast majority of the child victims that we would find fell outside the purview of the United States.
It's very difficult because we in the United States have a lot of protections for privacy, especially when it comes to financial transactions. But how do we get the information to see a pattern of sex trafficking?
Before this law was passed, it was passed in 2006. In order to prosecute on the US side an American who was sexually abusing children in other countries, you had to prove that that person had intent to rape that child while standing on US soil. So you can imagine how many prosecutions we had prior to this law, like 0. Unless I could tie a US traveler to the case, I would not be able to rescue the children, even the ones that we were able to identify as being victims. But I could find the kids no matter what. It's outside of the jurisdiction, and I understood that. However, that doesn't mean that we couldn't be doing more.
It takes a little bit of an effort, but that's what we've got to do, and we've got to fight like hell to try and get these kids back and get them back on track. But in a lot of cases, once they're gone, they're gone.
We need to find some partners that are like-minded. Is there a way that, you know, we can help each other?
Yeah.
Because we're in the same kind of business. You know, who's got big lists that we can leverage me and say, we'll help you, you help us.
Have you ever connected it?
I met Tim through, I think, a series of coincidences that led me to one of his books. He's a tremendous writer. Tremendous researcher. I mean, he's really bright. So I knew him as an author, and we became friends, and I didn't know that he had this secret double life. I was coming in, I don't remember where it was, but I was coming into town, and he was in town, and he said, hey, do you mind if we meet and talk? I said, sure. I said, I'm going to be staying in the hotel, you know, this hotel. Why don't you just come up? And he said, well, why don't we meet in a conference room? Okay.
Wanting the world to wake up to what's going on in 2 million children are sex slaves.
And he reached under his shirt and he pulled a federal badge out on the chain and he sat there. He looked at everybody and said, am I in trouble? Am I going to prison? What is this?
It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. I go back to 19th century America to the slave problem, and we should congratulate ourselves. We eradicated slavery. It's bullcrap. We've not eradicated it.
And he explained what he was doing, and explained that he needed to get out of working with the government, and he had a way that we could really make an impact, but they needed $1 million to start it.
$10,000 to put a jump team together, go on a team if it's overseas, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we have jump teams that do this. They're ex-Navy SEALs. They're people like me who are willing to do this.
And I happened to be with an attorney, and he was sitting with me, and I asked a whole bunch of questions, and my attorney said, no, you can't. What happens if something goes wrong, blah, blah, blah. If you're raising money and it's on the border and these guys you're in Texas.
Glenn, aren't you doing brilliant spying on people? And isn't that what this is? That people are using the internet and the privacy of their own home? I'm not condoning the action, I'm just saying that.
Child pornography, you're damn right I would. I would do it through law enforcement, and I would do it exactly legal. But I mean, this is child trafficking.
Tim is the most sincere, most honest, honorable man I think I've ever met. And I said, I'm in. We'll raise your first $1 million.
We're not saying we become a police force.
No, I'm just worried that, they close down the wrong door and then,
Bring it on. I will promote, I will do, but when you help develop with you, I mean, my time, my network, everything is at your disposal.
I had a great uncle and a great grandfather who both died in the notorious concentration camp in the South. They were fighting for the North. I didn't know that. Nobody in my family knew that. They were fighting to free the slaves. They did it. Why can't I?
You know, Abraham Lincoln, when he was grappling with the Emancipation Proclamation, the nation didn't want him to do it. Even in the North, they didn't want him to do it. And he went through something. In 1862, his son died. And he got extremely empathetic. And he started even turning to God and praying like he never had before. Historians have called it a Damascus Road experience for him. Then he just said, you know, come hell or high water, I'm doing this. No one in his cabinet really wanted him to. And he says, I'm doing it. And he changed the course of the war and changed the course of history by making the war about human freedom, liberating the captive. And then the whole thing changed, which led to the 13th Amendment and so forth. This is what we all need to do. Stop putting the walls up. These are real kids and they don't have anybody. And if we don't open up, no one's gonna open up. But when you do open up, it hurts a little bit. But then you become so much more effective in what you're trying to do. And ideas and inspiration, I'd argue even miracles start happening when you do that.
Operation Underground Railroad is a fairly new organization, just over 2 years old, but it's captured a lot of media attention with its missions to rescue child slaves throughout the world.
India, Haiti, Mexico. They go into the darkest corners of the world and work with law enforcement to rescue children from slavery. Since its inception, a little over 2 years ago, they've helped authorities arrest 157 people in 12 different countries. Most of that work...
I never dreamed that I would work in Haiti. I didn't know anything really about Haiti until I learned about a little boy who was born in Utah, U.S. citizen, and was kidnapped in Haiti from his church, where his father was the pastor. And that little boy was taken and he was kidnapped. I read about it in the local newspaper, and I just had to do something about it. I thought that I could make it into a U.S. case, and I couldn't because it wasn't. It was a Haitian case. The man, the father of this boy who I met, who changed my world, is Gesno Marty. And Gesno is sitting right here. Gesno, just stand up. This is Gesno Marty. And I have so much to say about Gesno. We went to Haiti to look for his son, but the only way for us to go to Haiti would be we had to leave our jobs. I had to leave my job because I didn't have enough leave from work. I loved my job. I love working for Homeland Security. I mean, these are the best people on the planet doing the best work. And all the colleagues I had floated this idea to before, in the weeks leading up, said, you're crazy, don't do this, you're crazy. And John Lyons looked at me, and he started off with, you're crazy, and I'm like, here I go, again, you know. But he said something, he said, you're crazy if you don't try this.
I was encouraging overtly, but in my heart of hearts, I thought, that's gonna be a tough go. That's gonna be a tough go to leave the security of the US government and go save children around the world.
"3 years old, Gardy, his name was Gardy. They kidnapped him from the church where Gesno was the pastor. They took him, this little boy, and they trafficked him. And this happens all the time in Haiti. I remember reading the story, and there was a picture of Gesno, and my heart just melted as a father, just melted for him. And I thought, I have enough experience to know very little is being done to find this little boy.
Well, he was 3 when they took him, now he's 10. that first happened, I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't even get into my house and sleep because as a father, my job is, getting my son back. I spent months before I could even get into a house and sleep inside. One of the suspects, I know him, Usually, I don't know for everywhere, but in Haiti, people who kidnap others, they don't do that randomly. They know their victims, Even when the legal authorities say there's nothing they can do about it. One of the time I talked to them, they asked me to bring them a solid lead, and they will come and destroy whatever to get him back to me. But I have to get the lead. This one, and I have no means for doing that. So, sometimes when people are in holidays, and I took my vehicle and going into the mountain, trying to, in a public open market, trying to see if my boy might come there, in a very long trip.
What's your drink like?
I feel that it is my duty, it is, my responsibility to get him back. Yeah. And I will not let go.
We got to Haiti and we worked with law enforcement, and we went in there looking for Gardy, and we never found him. What we did find was two things. We found that this child was trafficked through what looked to be like an orphanage. It wasn't an orphanage. And we were asked by the Haitian police to go undercover with hidden cameras and go into this place that was selling children. They were selling children for $10,000, and then they raised the price to $15,000. The traffickers were selling kids, and we were able to dismantle that organization. And we had to buy 2 children in the process. We had to buy 2 children. What's in the video? What's in it? How old is he in the video? Huh?
14. We got him a 14-year-old right here. Yeah, 14 in the video.
All right. Yeah, have you the girl too? You've been the little girl? That's what I like. Man, I'm okay with that.
I like little girl.
You like little girl? You like little girl? What's the youngest little girl you've ever
It's like PPTI only in Hawaii.
Yes. 10? 10 years old? Motherfucker! I sat across from these guys, as they told me about the children that they had been raping, and they laughed about it. And they laughed and they scoffed, and they said, "You get to do it next." And it's horrifying, horrifying. Now this was on Super Bowl Sunday, and this is where the story gets very interesting.
On Super Bowl Sunday, a lot of Americans having those Super Bowl parties, hot wings, watching the big game. But a local nonprofit organization that fights human trafficking spent their Super Bowl weekend in Haiti.
I'm about to take the 11-year-old. I'm about to take your youngest.
Timothy Ballard and his team at Operation Underground Railroad worked undercover pretending to purchase young girls for sex. Ballard says the men sold him 20 minors as young as 11 years old.
It was Super Bowl Sunday, February 5th, 2017. We had set up this operation that what looked like it went flawless.
In Operation Underground Railroad, we always want to ensure that if these rescued children cannot go back to their parents, then they go into vetted safe houses, orphanages, rehabilitation centers. So our aftercare team, led by Ms. Jessica Mass, who is here with us today, spent weeks liaisoning with partners in Haiti, not just Guesno and his safe house, but others whose names cannot be shared now for their own protection.
We'll go into a country, and the first question we ask, if the police or that government wants to work with us, the first question we ask is, what kind of aftercare capabilities are you aware of? These kids, so many of them, there's no home to go home to. It's not like this happy story all the time where it's like, oh, your loving family has been waiting for you in the garden and the trees are there and the beautiful flowers and just go hug them and all is well. I mean, generally that's not the case. I wish it were, but generally the fact that there was no family or the family was part of the problem, that's how they got trafficked.
And that's where everybody else screws it up. It's where we screwed up. That's the reconstruction part. The ending of the slavery was good. Now, how do we make sure that we provide the tools to be able to make it and to be able to have a fair shot at something that you've never experienced before? I can't even imagine the scarring that they have. And to be able to see them turn their lives around. Remarkable.
We laid out the whole operation. You saw from the video the beautiful Calico Beach Club. We have to play the role of very wealthy sex tourists, and so we had the whole operation set up, and it went beautifully.
When police arrived, they arrested 9 men from 3 separate human trafficking rings and liberated 29 victims.
Our Haitian partners did an amazing job. We made the arrest, we got the girls immediately to the area where we were assured that they would get the support they need.
We were so excited. We were excited that these girls were finally going to have hope and healing. It was just a couple days after that I received the phone call.
We unfortunately got some very frustrating news a few days after the operation.
The traffickers were being released and that all the girls were released.
They get released. They get freed. They pay money to the right people, to the judges. I remember when we got that word, I remember Jessica, Matt, we were in tears. We were in tears. We couldn't believe that these kids could be put in harm's way again.
Half the girls had family members that showed up, and the other half had traffickers that showed up for them.
These guys who were laughing about raping children were now laughing their way home. We didn't know what to do. We had some long talks about it, with Gesno and Dimitri, and they just said, please don't give up. Don't give up. There are good people in this government that want this problem to go away. And what happened was what we hoped would happen. The good people who didn't know what happened to us, they came to us. The good people came to us and they said, we didn't know this truth. We didn't know what had happened, but we will not stand for it. And I'm looking at the good people right now who came to us. The job's not quite done, but it's almost done, because now we need to go back and we need to rearrest every single one of these traffickers. And it will be a message to Haiti, to America, to the whole world, that there are good people everywhere that will stand up for this, that there is light. In this dark world, there's light. If we don't become that light, there is no light.
I'll find him. It's something I don't want to talk about it because I know I will find him. I will find him. One day something will happen, I'll find it.